was just somewhere else, which was so beautiful. I've only found a small percentage of that feeling again in some of my meditation I do, and like light source energy, like whether we want to call it God or the universe, but it's such a beautiful space to be in that you don't want to return because the love that you feel is just unbelievable.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Channel Within. I'm Mira, and today I'm delighted to be talking with Anne Bayford, who is a psychic medium, holistic therapist, and mentor with over 20 years of experience in spiritual work. Welcome, Anne, and thank you so much for being here with me today.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to join you today and to have this conversation. I don't know what's to come next. I love it.
The feeling is mutual. So, is it okay if we start with life before your NDE? And I also am interested to find out because it seems like you were born with psychic abilities as well. So if we could get started with life before and then jump into the NDE.
God, it sounds such a long time ago. Feels like a long time ago. I'm 57 now and going back all those years ago feels like a very long time ago. God, I can't believe I had a life before the NDEs, honestly. Yeah, so as a child, I would hear spirit, but I didn't understand that at the time. I would hear and feel spirit. I would often see figures walking through the doorway or through a wall. And again, I had no idea because nobody told me that it could, I couldn't be seeing that. And I know today when I work with clients, I have a lot of parents come to me because their children, they sort of say their children have got these invisible friends. And I'm like, well, these are their guides that have stepped in, and children can see their guides, with adults, we're like, what you can't see, you don't believe, but actually it's the other way around. So, yeah, it seemed a very, I felt quite isolated as a child. It was quite a toxic family I was born into, sort of very dysfunctional. I had three dads, two stepdads. My father left when I was very young. Um, and literally, trying to hide away from the physical abuse that my father would beat my mum up, my stepfather. And one of them, my stepfather's had, and he was an alcoholic, and the other one used to use drugs. So it was quite a dysfunctional family background. I'd suffered quite a lot, sort of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse as a child. And so I remember I was talking to a friend the other day. I said, oh, I always remember as a child sitting there praying to God. And I was like, well, if there's a God, why am I still going through this? And I know lots of people who, I work with now say the same thing, but I just felt I had been abandoned, that no one was there to look after me or protect me. And then I'd lived a little bit of my life with my grandparents. Um, and we were moved about from house to house. We'd literally go to school, come home, and next minute we were moving again because trying to run away from one of my stepdads who was quite abusive. So we felt very unsettled. Um, so that was the childhood and seeing things and talking to animals. I'm animal communicator, featured in a lot of magazines in the UK now. And I could just hear animals talking to me. So, telepathy, I was picking up on their conversation. And again, how are you supposed to know that's not normal when you're a child? Because, no one tells you that because not as you share it with somebody. I was always the weird child. I liked snakes and this was the way that I could communicate with kids and other children my age then would sort of like me and talk to me. I was the geek, the odd one, going to the library, looking at books, consuming books. I remember even having a conversation with a librarian when I was a child. I got so bored of just looking at the pictures in the children's section. Could I go into the adult section? And I remember she wasn't very happy, but in the end I did. And I was bringing books home at a time, just absorbing all the information. I was fascinated with the Egyptian period, and now I know why, because I'm a past life practitioner, and so I understand why there must have been a past life there. So that was my childhood, and during my teens, I remember sort of saying to my mum, I could see that a neighbour of ours was actually going to pass over; she was going to die. She had breast cancer, because I understood about cancer at the time I was a teenager. And my mum had said to me, you've got to stop telling people this. You've got to stop saying that you can see their auntie or their uncle or their grandma, whoever it is, standing by their side because you're freaking everyone out. But for me, it was quite normal. And she said also people are going to think you're crazy. And there was actually an episode where I was very depressed as a child. There was a lot going on. I'd even attracted poltergeists where we lived. So, pictures flying off the wall, and there was a lot going on. And there was a point where I was quite suicidal as a teenager. I was really, really unhappy. And actually, I joke about it now because I feel I'm the best person to deal with clients who are suicidal. And I don't mean to joke or laugh about it, but I do a lot of work with those on the other side who are suicidal, that come forward, and I help to heal them and to help them to move on, because they can be like living in limbo if they're not realizing that actually they were successful during that period of time. And then clients, as a counselor therapist and the work that I do, I also see those who are very suicidal. I help them to move through it, and I haven't lost one yet. And I don't mean that flippantly, but I haven't. I feel because I was suicidal as a teenager. I was a very
Yeah.
difficult time. So I remember those feelings very well. I know I joke and I quite flippant about it, because, the work that I do now, and I understand about death and the past, and we're moving through different dimensions. But it can feel so isolating when you're going for an episode, and you can't see what's the next day is going to hold for you. And literally this week I've had three clients that have been suicidal, and I've spoken to them, those on this earth side, and now I've worked with the doctors with them, and they seem to be having that care they need, so they're okay. So I'm okay about that. They're fine. But you're penalized with religion, and it's not anti-religion at all. I think what made me look at spiritual stuff, really, for me, spiritual work, is that, one of my stepfathers was a Rastafarian, Jamaican Rastafarian. The other stepfather was Italian Catholic. My biological father's studies Buddhism. My ex-partner is Jewish. My mother-in-law is a Finnish Quaker. I took my children to a Church of England school, and I've been brought up in a Hindu area and Sikh and Muslims and stuff. And so I've got an idea of some of what the religions sort of think of suicide, and taking your own life. And I think it's quite unfair. I'm not saying anyone should commit suicide. I think you should get the help first, because neurologically, with the brain and things that are going on, I understand that and the science of that. But if you, and how am I going to word this? If, say, for instance, someone is suicidal, and they don't seek that help, and they do pass over in whatever method they do, they can struggle on the other side. They do go to a place like, it's a bit like limbo. It's a bit like in the zombie. I've worked with clients who are earthbound that have had a relative that has committed suicide, and I've worked with them, and they often don't realize they were successful, and they're stuck in time. And I have to work with them to help to heal them, and to ask for another family member on the other side to come forward to help them. And then once they're on the other side, if you find someone like myself that can help them to move through it, I think also why the universe sort of directed me on the course of being a counselor was that I can also counsel those on the other side. So that's why I love what I do, because it's not just about being a psychic medium and telling the future, because that's not really how I work. I really work with that soul journey. So those who are on the other side who have committed suicide, I sort of work with them, helping them to look at, well, what happened? Because when they move over, if they're suicidal and they're in that limbo, they're not working through the Akashic Records, they're not doing that soul recovery work, they're not doing any of that at all on themselves. So as I say, take someone like myself to work with them. And that's why I love what I do. And I had a conversation with a client yesterday, actually. She was talking about assisted suicide because her mother has dementia. And again, when you're working with clients who have dementia, their minds are off anyway. It's like they're moving in and out different dimensions. Like when we dream, we're moving in and out different dimensions too. No, she didn't have to tell me her mother had dementia. I could feel it, and then she agreed she had. And I said, it's something that she really would need to speak to a number of doctors, obviously, before she was going to go down that avenue. But I said, to be honest, where your mother is with her dementia, she's quite happy. So when she goes off, when she's sitting in bed during the day or on her chair, whatever, she goes off into space. She goes off. She actually communicates with those on the other side. So unless she was actually suffering like some terminal illness, there was no need for her to have that assisted suicide. But yeah, it's you're not persecuted on the other side if you want to leave earth plane. But I don't recommend it because I also, as a therapist and counselor, I know that actually your soul is here to actually go through this growth, these lessons. This is our teaching area. So when times are feeling really tough, and believe me, I know what those toughness can feel like as well. And not that I'm top trumping anyone on that at all, but when times are tough, there's a soul lesson there. That's why we're here in the first place. You know, I trained with Dr. Brian Wise in America with this. I'm a past life practitioner. And I sit with clients when I do a soul audit. And if they've got issues going on now in their lives, what I will do is I'll sit here first, tune into their energy, what's coming up for them. And then we unravel the thread. And sometimes that it's an issue that's happened in a past life that where hasn't been resolved for whatever reason, maybe there's some sort of death, sort of, you know, from some sort of trauma or whatever, and you haven't solved it, it comes over into this present life where we are now. And so you will have remnants of it. So, like you said, that visual feeling that you felt, you know, when you mentioned suicide, is there's probably some, you know, it's probably accessing something from the past memory. It's a bit like it's a bit like, as a therapist, I would say emotional trigger today. If someone has an issue that comes up, you know, if you're in a new relationship and something happens, you know, that your partner's gone off and started texting, and you know, it flares something up inside of you because you've had a partner that's cheated on you. That's an emotional trigger. Now, that's an energy fingerprint that you're holding in your soul because it's something you need to work through. So that's not just for this lifetime, it could be other lifetimes. You know, when I'm sitting with people, they might have a soulmate that's come in from a past lifetime, or a twin flame, or there's some sort of connection. There's something that needs to be learned. There's a lesson there. So, you know, so I'll sit with them and you know, I will tell them. I'm not one of those that believe that, you know, the person in front of them should give them all the information. I need to prove it. I need to give you evidence. So I will then say to the person, look, in this lifetime, this is what might be happening. You might have issues with money. Now, when I trace it back to a past lifetime, it's because of whatever the reason is. So, yes, when you said what you said, there's always emotional echoes of fingerprints in your soul energy. So it stays there. Um, yeah, so you can bring it up in a session where that is revealed and you do the work on it. Yeah, love it. My findings, and I've done now 11,500 sittings around the world over the last God knows how many years, and also teach and everything else that I do. And my findings are, from me personally, what I've come across, and I must have handled now, must be about 200 suicides. So from my own experience, so what I have found that those who have taken their own life, that when they pass over, as I say, some of them don't even realize that they are dead, that their body no longer exists because consciously, and this is consciously on the other side, they're still sort of suffering. So for whatever reason why they would have taken their own life is still going around. It's like Groundhog Day. So the, you know, the movie Groundhog Day, that's a prime like example of how it feels like when you're on the other side. It feels like you can't escape it. So one gentleman, I actually found him, and he was with him. It was a bit different. He was sitting on his grave, and he was just there, and he was in the darkness. Now he didn't even know he was on his sitting on his grave or his grave tomb, the stone. But I found him curled up on the other side, and he didn't realize that he was successful in committing suicide. He had taken an overdose. All I knew that he knew was that he was scared. It was in the dark. He was scared. He was fearful. At no point did he reach out for help from angels or God or the universe or whatever we want to call it. Now, if you're consciously aware that you have been successful in taking your life, and I haven't found that in the 200 sittings I've done with suicides, but if you were consciously aware that you had committed suicide, you would get the healing and help on the other side. Now, I've also had people with attachments and walk-ins, those who have committed suicide and they don't leave the earth plane and they're still wondering. And I've had that, what happened to my son, and I've worked with people who've had that, where their personality of the person who had committed suicide has entered into a physical being because the soul needs a physical vessel to have a sensory system. So when the soul leaves that physical vessel, the human being, it's no longer being, it's not human, it's not being. The soul doesn't have the sensory system. As the human, we have all our, our senses, a hearing, a seeing, a tasting, a touching, and everything else. So this particular gentleman had literally, my son was walking across the tube, underground train station in London, and suddenly he switched, his personality switched. And the gentleman that was inside of him stayed with him for a couple of hours. And when he came home, I had to release him to let go of him. Now, I called in relatives on the other side, and because I suppose the field that I work in, I knew straight away my son had an attachment. And then I called in those on the other side, and his mother and grandmother had been looking for him since the 1970s. And this was only a couple of years ago this happened. And they were looking for him on the other side. And by bringing them forward, he then gently, as much as I could, gently get him to move away from my son and came out and went to the other side, and you got healing. But you have to consciously know that you have passed over. And as I say, if you have committed suicide, some of them have no understanding that they have been successful. And then I sit with them and then they understand and I help to release them on the other side.
And thank you for work in this area because we all know of family members and friends who have died by suicide. And when I was younger, I had such an arrogant view towards it that these individuals are very selfish. But like you said, it's like they see no hope. And thank you for the work being
You're
done.
most welcome. And I honestly believe that's the reason. I have a friend who does numerology and I've got a lot of the master numbers. And she said, God, you've got such a hard life. And I went, I think that's the reason for that is the preparation for the work that I do with clients and the work that I do now. And I had to experience those experiences myself so that then I could sit here and I have some understanding. But there were moments when, I would also, before I did the work as a counselor, think that these people are being very selfish. They should pull themselves together. And then until it happened to me, then now I understand it totally.
So Anne, let's jump into the NDE. I really like that we did talk about that because I feel like that compassion and is needed in this
Yeah.
area.
Thank you. And so, yes, so I ended up being in a toxic relationship, having a toxic family background. Typical, from a therapist point of view, if I see this in clients, it's like you end up repeating the same cycle that you've had in your family. And then, ancestrally, the family line, and if it's the women they've gone through something or whatever, the parents, you're likely to copy the behavior because it's learned behavior. And so I ended up repeating the cycle that my mum had gone through, my grandmother and great grandmother, and so forth, where I put myself last and I always put my partner first. And he was very controlling with money. And, it was not a happy situation. As a child, we'd had no money, and and so I valued what I had with him, but he was very controlling. So it made sense I was going to fall for somebody who was a covert narcissist. It made so much sense. So I ended up having the family, the children, two children after I had five miscarriages, but I knew I was going to crack it one day, and I did. So I had the five miscarriages, then I had the children, and Rebecca and Nathan. Nathan was 5, Rebecca was 7 at the time, and now this is where it gets to me because I still feel it today. So it was 2002, March the 11th, and all of the twos. It was about 20 past 2, something like that. I was working in London. And I loved the job I was doing. I liked the caring profession and worked for set up a project for charity in London for the elderly. Really loved the job I did, and it was on site in London and it was with the elderly. And I remember the day that I said goodbye to everybody. I had to rush, I had to go pick up the children, and because in the morning I'd quickly gave them a kiss on the forehead, run away. I've got to go to work, rushing, as you do. As a parent, you're juggling everything, and trying to work and bring up children was difficult. And like most parents have, no different. And so I had to really think about, I had to get home shortly. I had to get on the train to get back to where I lived. Couldn't miss the train because, the children were so young. Um, and I knew how to get back. But I remember leaving the office that day. It was in a community centre, and there was a piano playing, and they were playing bingo, the elderly there, and they were all waving out to me, and they're singing tunes going back to the war and stuff, and it was lovely. And I remember coming out the office, I had a letter in my hand, and I was like, well, I'm going to get the train, so I want to read newspaper. But I remember in my head, like we all do, it was like 100 things juggling, what are we having for dinner tonight? Did I pay that bill? I've got to take the dog out for a walk, got to pick the kids up from school, I've got to post this letter because it's still with the client, blah, blah, blah. And I remember walking to the end of the road, it got to the corner, and I turned around. And I there was a few people waiting at the traffic lights to press the button to say, you can cross, it's safe, whatever. And it was in busy London. This road is notorious for people getting knocked down. I've just found out as well. And someone had, in my head, I was thinking, right, well, if it's Green Man, which means I can cross safely, I'm going to cross now, rather than going on the train without the newspaper, and rather than posting the letter by the school. And so that was going in my head. So somebody pressed the button, Green Man, it was safe to cross. I think it was 5 people in total that walked across the road, got to the middle island, and I was so used to the traffic in London comes in all different directions. I was looking both ways. Those people had walked ahead, and it was instant. Instant. It's really funny when we think of the time concept, how quickly these things happen. Because literally, I'm still in my head, checking on the road, making sure it's safe to cross. And I'm having thoughts in my head about, do I cross the road straight ahead of me, post the letter in the letterbox, or do I cross in a little bit of a direction and go get the newspaper? And these were vital moves, and I didn't know that. It's like on a chess set when you play those vital moves, checkmate and stuff. And then I also heard my nan's voice. And I was like, but my nan died when I was 15. I'm around about 37 now. And I was like, it can't be my nan. So I was questioning everything. And, just before the accident, I was very much like seeing is believing. But that day, totally everything changed. Believing you shall see. That's what I know now. So what happened is this is going over in my head. I then felt very warm, but it was a cold, crispy day in London. And I saw this white light. I felt I was surrounded by white light. Now, I didn't know that at that moment in time that as I was crossing direction, my right foot had gone down onto the road. And then there was a van that was driving at 40 miles per hour. It was like I was told later, so quite fast. And he didn't stop at the red light and he drove straight through me. Now, because I had decided to get the newspaper, which didn't make sense, but at the time I was told, I was instructed by my grandma, go get the newspaper. Because I had gone at an angle, I bounced off the actual van. Now, if I'd gone straight across, which would have made logical sense, to post the letter, I would have gone through the windscreen, and the police later told me I probably would have severed my head through the windscreen. So that's what physically was happening. So I bounced off the van. I then flew about 40 feet onto the ground, further up the road, whacked down on my right hand side. I'd twisted my ankle out of joint, broken my foot 7 places in my foot, and my Achilles was
Oh
damaged.
gosh.
Yeah, I know, it sounds good, sorry. Um, then as I bounced off the side of the van, my kidneys were internally bleeding, my spleen was bleeding, I was hemorrhaging inside. I'd fractured and broke ribs on both sides. I'd also, as I landed on my right hand side, my pelvis, my hip had chipped. It fractured on one side, and I'd severed a lot of my uh, structure of my trunk of my body. So when I was starting to heal later on, it looked like a giant watermelon that was a bruise. It was so bad. So my heart had stopped as well, which again, I wasn't in my physical body. I didn't know any of this. I didn't feel any pain at all. And I've also been told on the other side as a medium that people don't feel pain when they pass through onto the other side, which is brilliant. It's great. So I didn't feel any pain. My heart had stopped. And all I know is this white light was surrounding me. Heard my nan's voice. And then there was another part of me which I later found out we fracture. We sort of depend on what's happening. So the trauma made my soul sort of fracture. It was like a bit like the Matrix when your body's moving around, sort of thing, a bit like that. And it felt like a real out of body experience where I ended up, part of me was looking down on the road seeing like an audience of loads of people sort of stopping this big crowd looking at something, which I couldn't make out what it was at the time. And I was just looking down. I could see a family relative. This was Uncle Peter, that he'd witnessed it. He'd come out of the post office. He'd witnessed everything that had happened. And I was just looking at him thinking, why does he look so grey and so stressed? You know, what's he looking at? I don't understand. And at the same time, the 1 o'clock club, you know, it wasn't 1 o'clock, it was after that time, but the old people that, or the elderly people that was in that community hall was on this bus as well. So they were looking out the window, seeing it was me. I didn't know that at the time, I later found out. And then we had a lady that was owned the hairdressers, which I later found out. I could see her running, saying, I'm going to get her a towel. I'm going to roll it up onto her neck. And everyone was like, no, don't touch her. You know, she might have broken her neck. And I could hear it. There was like sheer panic around me. But I didn't know it was me. And again, I was just looking down. There was somebody in the road. And then there was another part of me that had fractured off it through the trauma that I was sitting in the lorry cab where he drives it, a complete stranger, listening to him moaning because some woman had gone out of her way and held up all the traffic, and now the road was blocked and he couldn't get to where he was going to. And then, you know, I started hearing sirens and I didn't know again. And then I saw a paramedic who arrived on a motorbike. I could hear also one of the radio stations that was in this lorry that they were sending air ambulance. And again, I didn't know it was me. Now, the only time I knew it was me was when they had knew my partner worked up the road, and he was sort of, his mum was running down the road. He took it, you know, a bit slower, came down the road, placed his hand on my head, and he stroked my hair. And the first thing he said, and then I knew it was the end of the relationship, the first thing he said was, how am I going to manage Rebecca and Nathan? How am I going to cope? So instead of thinking, I love Anne, it was a deciding factor for me. We was in a toxic relationship anyway, so it's like I was staying there with him because he's their father, and you know I thought it was the best thing to do, and then you know realizing no, it wasn't. But anyway, so that was going on there, but I was just somewhere else, which was so beautiful. And to be honest, I've only found a small percentage of that feeling again in some of my meditation I do, and sometimes when I'm doing trance channeling with light council, I feel it. So I often teach my students, I tell them about light source energy, like whether we want to call it God or the universe, but it's such a beautiful space to be in. And I feel I've heard this from many people who've had near-death experiences, that you don't want to return because the love that you feel is just unbelievable. And I did not want to return, and I felt guilty for a very long time when I came back, that how could I even think about leaving my children? But I was not receiving that. I'd never received that unconditional love before. And that's what it is. It's unconditional love and acceptance of who you are. So whether we want to label that as God, universe, source, whatever we want to call it, whatever makes any of us comfortable with, that's where we reside. Our souls reside within that light source energy. And I remember that presence. I can still feel it today because I go into trance channeling, but that presence of being held, accepted for who you are, being in that space. And I remember that there were beings around me, and I work with them now, which is I feel so fortunate that I do, and grateful. But being there and just seeing, and it's funny to say seeing, but seeing light beings around me, seeing individuals dressed in, you know, cloaks, or they were like, they had no feet, they were gliding around, they didn't need feet. And then I've been showing documentation and showing me all this information, and them saying to me, you must remember this. This is something to take back with you. And I remember feeling like a child thinking, I must remember, I must remember. And I sort of didn't ask questions. I was just shown it. So it was like a whole soul review of all the past lifetimes I'd been in, all the work that I had done, all the work I'm going to do now, the work that I do, everything I do with my clients and students. They were telling me it was time to step forward, that I had to bring information to the world, and that to bridge that information from light source, to bring it forward so that people have a better understanding of humanity, so they understand death and they understand the reason why they're here. So they were just installing so much information. And it just felt there were no walls. It just felt there was almost like a library, as in books or information that was being held there. It was like artifacts being held there. And but I was also told that I was seeing what made me feel comfortable to see. So there may be other individuals that may see something slightly different, but it was about what they thought that place was. I was told it was the Hall of Souls. And
Okay.
and now I'm like told it's called the Akashic Records, but it is literally all the data documentation of your soul is held in this place. Now, one of my students said to me one day, "Well, does that mean even when we go to the bathroom?" And I went, "No, they're not interested in when you go. Are you learning anything when you go to the bathroom? No, your soul information about what you have learned through life. You know, those emotional times, those energy fingerprints of the echoes of trauma or drama or happiness or love, that's all stored there. And those connections that you have, your soul pod connections, you family members, and how in each lifetime that you come into each life is something different that you're learning. But all that information is held there. So I remember having all that information that came in, and it just that pure unconditional love. Now, when the ambulance finally arrived, and that physical side and paddled me with the electric, and brought me back to life, my heart, that's when I felt the pain, and that's when I felt I was coming down like a water slide and coming very fast and coming back into the body. And on the way to the hospital, I was in and out of consciousness, and in the crash room, I remember I had had an out body experience, and I was looking down at my body, and I could feel all the members of staff, the doctors, the nurses that were panicking to keep me alive. Um, they was with me there, and I could see that. And I remember also being in the ICU, intensive care, that I remember feeling my nan was there with me, and our loved ones on the other side say, "Step forward when we need them." So, when I woke up, I remember saying to the nurse, "Where's my nan?" But she had passed many years ago, but she was watching over me like a guardian angel. So, but the experience was, yeah, it's just amazing. I'm never gonna lose that experience. Never. Brilliant.
That's really beautiful. The fact that it seems like you guys never lose that sense of remembrance. It stays with you forever. And also the feeling of unconditional love. So, and who are the light beings that you met on the other side?
Okay, so with the light beings on the other side, I love this because I do a lot of work with them now. There's there are many dimensions to our world in a sense. So the world that we are born into, it sounds weird by saying born because that means born as in as the human being, but we know we're born before that, and we're here before that. That our 3D world that we are taking in the world around us, that's one dimension of ourselves that we learn about ourselves. But there are other loads of different types of other different dimensions. So like our dream dimension we go into, even, we think of ourselves now that, you know, when I know working as a therapist, the minute somebody has gone through something that's happened to them, some sort of drama, they wake up to the fact that life doesn't have to be like that. People leave in toxic relationships. They always thought that's how people treat you, and then they wake up, and that sort of consciously waking up. I mean, spiritual awakening. They realize you don't have to live life like this. Now, with the light beings on the other side, again, we can connect to light beings, but it's down to the individual how much conscious awareness you've done yourself. So we're all able to connect to source energy, and this what grates my gears, shall I say. I heard that expression somewhere. um we don't need leaders. We don't This is going to really rock the boat. We don't need those individuals to tell us that we can only connect to God or Allah or whoever through a religious leader. We don't need that. God was not about, oh, I'm going to label it as God, or the universe. It was not about separation. It was never about separation at all. It was always about our own individual connection. And this is what I teach my students so much now. It's really important that you have your own individual connection, that you work with your sixth sense, your natural abilities, your intuition, So important. Just like animals know if there's a storm coming, because we have to know it for ourselves. For what's going to come on our planet, for humanity, we have to learn that we need to have our own set of special gifts, like the superhumans. Okay, we are all superheroes, but we've got to learn ourselves and not to separate ourselves. It's not that we need God or the universe or Allah or whoever to forgive us for anything that we've done wrong. As long as we have learnt ourselves and we know it's wrong, we don't have to, whatever it is, pay our way, whatever it is, or whatever religions say we need to do. So with light beings, those are energy beings on the other side that work with souls. So those there's a whole different collection there. So you've got light beings that would have never had a human existence, and their role has always been that they were to receive souls and to help that soul to understand their process. You know, I just heard this, I've just heard from a guide that they are not brave enough to come on human planet and have the human experience. I love that. That's the
I
chicken.
love that too.
I wasn't expecting that. But my guide has just come in and said this that they would never have wanted to experience the human experience. So you have those sort of those light beings that will help souls that cross over. Thank you. I've just heard their mission is that so nobody that who exists on planet Earth when they are passing, that they will never pass through on their own. There is always a light being to guide them over. Even if they don't have family members or loved ones or friends to be there will always be someone to greet them. They're always going to lead them over onto the other side. And this is for animals too. I've just been told, they just said. So they are the will help with within the souls, the journey of the soul to help them to go through to the other side. Those are those type of light beings. And then we have the ascended masters. Ascended masters are like Jesus, Buddha, and all those have been here before having the human experience. I've even had Einstein come through one of my classes once, or a couple of times actually. So their souls and they've really elevated, they've really done the work on themselves, for humanity. And it's like there's no need for them to come back onto planet Earth as where it is right now and the stages that we're at. But they're there so that we can access information. So, through prayer, when we're praying on planet Earth, if that's what we want to call it, our connection or meditation is just as good or just the same, just a different name, that you are connecting to those on the other side. So ascended masters that have done the work on earth plane and they don't need to now to continue. They've risen so much that on the other side they still are there with the knowledge. I had someone the other day talking about they was having a conversation with Socrates and everybody else on the other side, like wow. So they're still having that information, they bring it forward onto planet Earth. And then we have other beings, and other beings in the sense of I've connected with Galactic Council. So Galactic Council sort of taking care of all the planets in the universe. We're not just the only planet that has life on it. So, Galactic Council as in appointed sort of to keep that balance sort of within the universe and stuff. And it's really interesting. Thank you. I've just heard this that it's quite arrogant, really, of planet Earth to think that the humans feel that this is the only planet that has living beings on it. But so you have like the Galactic Council, and they deal with, what's going on in the planets. And they just show me it's a bit like, is it Star Trek or Star Wars? Something like that. They sort of show me. So all the beings there, and thank you. Someone just said this to me. They don't judge on color of skin, creed or class or gender or disability. It's not seen as disability. You're just seen as who you are. So this is what someone just said to me. I love it. They're being very nosy and prying on this conversation, honestly. But so there's a collection of different beings. Um, and so they're here really to help us on our soul journey to have our awakening and how the universe, thank you, they said the universe sort of manipulates sort of time and space for us to learn our lessons. So and I think that what's really important for people to know is like where your mind is at. So, if your mind is going to look for negativity, if your mind is focusing on that, you're going to receive more of that. Because as we know, the universe can only give you like for like. So if you want to change your life, you have to do the work. You have to do the work in the sense of being open and looking at other possibilities for something, not just look through blinkers and stuff. And thank you. They said what humans tend to get caught out in is as humans like structure and routine. So if a family feels this way, then this possibly they're going to produce children that are going to think that structure that way unless something traumatic happens. And I think what also people need to know is that when drama does happen, or they feel their life's been turned upside down, it's only for their own good, as in the sense not being punished, but it's just literally helping them to move out of that. A bit like me getting knocked down by the car, or the van. It was for me to learn from that. I mean, I was disabled for 4 years. I couldn't walk. I was in a wheelchair and stuff. So it made me reflect and look at what was going on for me. So there are many different layers and dimensions of light beings. It's just what consciously you may be aware of, and you can gain access to that through either meditation, prayer, whatever it is. But it means doing the work, and some humans are lazy and they don't want to do the work.
Yes, that is true.
But they just said, sorry to interrupt you, because they have no patience, honestly. Um,
I
they
love
just,
it. I love it, by the way, it's a conversation with them, you and me.
yes. Well, this is like, when I do the mediumship, it's like the relatives on the other side want to come in and communicate. But yeah, I mean, we're connected to Light Council now, and they're trying to guide us that because of humans have this default button of destruction mode. So, it's thank you. They just sort of easily led, in a sense of, by I use social media. Come on, but by getting caught up in the social media, getting caught up in focusing on the material world, we're not tuning into ourselves. And I often say, and what they've taught me is that to connect to our higher self, and the higher self doesn't mean it's outside of the body, but the higher self is the wisdom part, the knowledge part, is about from the heart center. So it's about experiencing pain, the uncomfortability, and what do humans do? We might, and I'm not saying I don't drink alcohol, but we might then use substances to sort of like numb that pain, but then we don't continue to grow, we don't explore that. So when they say laziness, it just means that the humans often have something else they want to put in the way rather than doing the uncomfortable work on themselves and finding the space. And they said, thank you. Someone else just said to me to say this. Um, okay, thank you. They still don't understand how we work against nature. So, in the UK right now, it's winter, it's dark. And it's like, animals, what do when it's dark in winter? They curl up and hibernate. The world that we live in, we've got full lights. I've got brilliant bright lights in front of me to be working still till 9:30 in the evening. And so they still don't understand how we don't work with nature. So there are obstacles that are put in our way on our pathway on planet Earth, and that's why they want to help us. So if even if, thank you, they said, even if it's 5 minutes and you're sitting on the sofa and you're just tuning into your heart and your body, that will help, they said. I love this.
That is so reassuring that we have availability to help, for help, because there are times, when it seems so hard here, and it's nice to know that we have that access.
And it's so true. So it's interesting because they just said something else again. I'm like, my God, how long have we got? Um, they're saying fear. The fear is the biggest one that you have on this planet. And the fear is the one that detaches people, disconnects them. So again, I'm not anti-religion, but again, if we're told that there's certain things that we should follow life in a certain way and we don't do it, then what we do is we then criticize ourselves, saying we should do it this way, or other people will do it for us. And then we separate ourselves. We live in fear, and other feelings. Thank you. That will separate you from us. Thank you. They said, how can you connect to unconditional love if you do not love yourself? Oh, thank you. I love that. So it has to be that mode of the unconditional love. Thank you. They said it's that accepting of what you see in the mirror. It's that accepting of how you see yourself. It's that accepting. But on your planet, you do not accept yourself on your planet. There is always those moments where there is such criticism for yourselves. We do not understand this, but we have not had that human experience. The unconditional love is connecting back to your soul self. It's to accept yourself when you look in the mirror and to see the work that you feel that you must do upon yourself. It's the lessons that you are here on planet Earth. Oh my God, I never know when they're going to come in. Thankfully, they don't come in when I'm buying my vegetables at the supermarket.
Yeah, that was so lovely. And thank you so much for for allowing them to step in. So you wanted to talk about the recent rewiring that you had. Did you want to
Yeah,
talk about that a little bit? I
yeah,
do want to
okay.
be respectful of your time too, to
No
come again, coming up on the hour. But yeah, if you want to talk about that,
Yeah, no problem at all. I was just going to say, it's interesting because I've had the three near-death experiences, and the second one was literally I didn't believe in angels until my heart and my lungs stopped, and then I had my angel intervention. That was interesting, and then the next one was the heart stopped on the operating table, and I was told by one of my guides, and I remember being there, and they instructed me to come back, and I remember feeling that I'd done something wrong. It was interesting, so I keep being bounced back. And then the fourth time, I didn't die, but I literally had I had a brain seizure, brain bleed, and fell downstairs at home and totally collapsed. Broke my neck in t two places, and I had a concussion for over a year, and I had to relearn to walk and to talk for 14 weeks. And during that period of time, they were saying to me, my guides, my team, that for me to have a better connection with light source, so I can bring the information through, that they were rewiring my brain. And I said, thank you very much. I wish there was a less painful way of doing this and, it would be a bit more convenient. And I'd seen a specialist at the time, and she said that, you're not going to be able to walk again or talk again because of what happened to me because of the brain bleed was so bad. But literally after 14 weeks of sitting with my light council and asking him to come forward through my body with white light energy to heal me. And I took these mushroom capsules, not magic mushrooms, but magic capsules, and I learned to rewalk again. And now I'm absolutely fine. But their message to me was literally the circuitry in my brain. They needed to make some changes so that I could connect more, like an aerial, I suppose, connecting to them. So yeah, it's been a bit of an experience, but I'm still here to tell the tale.
That's wonderful. Not the difficult parts of it, but the fact that you had to be upgraded
Yeah.
to get that higher or that get access to that level of light. So
Yeah,
thank you for your
thank
for explaining that to us.
you.
Um, and I do have questions that I ask at the end.
Yeah.
This was so delightful. What did death teach you and teach us about how we should truly live?
Okay, that's a big one. For me, dying three times has taught me that never put anything off. Life is just too short. Never put anything off. Um, we always think that we're given an amount of time. We always think, oh yeah, I'll do that next week or I'll do that next year. And in a blink of an eye, that's it, it's done. And I've heard that through so many of my students and my clients that someone had a heart attack just like that. And, recently someone was on holiday and their husband just died just like that with them. So for me, it's taught me, never to put things off. You have to enjoy every single moment. And for me, that's what got me out of my toxic relationship. I want to live the rest of my life and I want to be happy. So that was really important. And I tried to look for in every day, I'm grateful for everything. I'm grateful that I'm walking. I'm grateful that I'm breathing because I've got a lung condition. I'm grateful that I'm sitting here. I'm looking out into my garden right now. It's raining, but I'm grateful for that too because without the rain, we don't get grass and we don't get the greenness. So it's like in every time that we think that something's a bit grey or dark or we're experiencing that something that's really upsetting to us is to look for that light in it. So that's what it's taught me, and that's what I teach a lot of my students and clients that to look for the light in your day. So yeah, and it doesn't hurt when you die. It it doesn't. It's and you're greeted on the other side from somebody else. It's okay, and your loved ones are there. It's like them being in another room. You just have to shout louder and like, do you want a cup of tea? Louder, but they're there with you. So that's what I learned from dying.
That's lovely. What brings you joy and laughter these days, Anne?
Ah, that's really easy. Apart from chocolate, dark chocolate. No, my grandson. My grandson.
Oh,
He's 15 months old, and when he was born, he gave me a beautiful gift telepathically. He still hadn't opened his eyes. The first day they brought him home, I had a download of information that I was learning from him about his past life he'd had with my son, and I all I could see was Roman soldiers, and I was like, hang on, he's not even watched TV yet. So where's he got that image from? So I'm getting a lot of proof from him, evidence. So I love being with him. We giggle all the time. We do silly things, splashing in puddles, and he's only just started walking. And it's that knowledge that he is showing me. So I will often ask him, even though he's not talking at the moment because he's only 15 months, but telepathically I'm receiving the information from him.
That's lovely. What final message or blessings do you have for those listening?
Yeah, however tough life gets, because it will do, it's a cycle and we can come out of this. We just have to have the strength while it's happening. And when it's the hardest, it means it's the best lesson we're learning right now. And to know you're going to come out on the other side because you will.
I love that. I really love that part.
So if you are interested and you are listening to this today, there is a discount code of it's YouTube 50. And if you go to my website, which is www.ambayford.com, then you will see there, if you look at the study, the courses, Discover Psych itself, you'll be able to get the 50% off while you can. And so hopefully that will help you on your journey.
Thank you so much, Anne, for joining me today. And thank you to everyone who's listening. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did.